Okay, so this is my mom's recipe for cornbread dressing. Just your basic recipe for cornbread dressing. If you want to add a few things, which I am going to show you a variety, but this is just your basic recipe for cornbread dressing. Some people add fruit like raisins or nuts or oysters. Any of that can be added to this recipe. So I'm just going to show you the basic recipe for cornbread dressing. So what I did was I went ahead and pre-baked my cornbread. It's fresh out of the oven. If it's a little under, it's okay, because this dish is going to cook some more in the oven after everything is mixed well together and combined. So I have a little, as us Southern folks call it, a little pot liquor from where I cooked down my giblets earlier. This is gizzards and hearts that are finely chopped. I just put them in a pot with some water, cook them down, and this is the liquid from that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 1 stick of butter to get it melted. Then I am going to dig right into my cornbread. See, it's piping hot. Get that in there so it can melt that butter down very well. I don't have the best utensil, I'm seeing, so I'll change that up. There we go. Just pull all that cornbread out of the skillet while it's hot, being careful not to burn yourself. Cornbread smells so good. And your cornbread does not have to be perfect. This cornbread looks a little tight. See, I got all the cornbread, most of the cornbread out of the skillet there. And I'm just gonna start breaking that cornbread down so the moisture, the little moisture that I have in there, the butter, everything starts to get incorporated. So, as you can see, that cornbread is really drinking up that moisture. Let me get my butter back down in there with that hot liquid. So, the trifecta, let me tell you about the trifecta. The trifecta is your bell peppers, your onion, and your celery. It varies. Sometimes you throw garlic in there, but this is one of your trifectas. So these 3 ingredients, what I did was I took those 3 ingredients, added a bit of water, and cooked those down. As you can see, you still see the smoke rising off of those. So what I'm going to do is now add that and the liquid. This is celery, bell pepper, and onion that I'm adding now. Yep, that pot is hot. To this. The cornbread is going to drink those items now. So you just still continue, because the butter is still melting, you still continue to break that cornbread down. This smells incredible, by the way. Make sure you just get everything incorporated. And you're going to break this down. Now, if you don't have enough liquid, as you're seeing, I don't. you're going to have to add some type of stock or broth. Now, typically, I have my hot liquid from my turkey, and I just ladle that in here. But being as that I'm not roasting, baking a turkey where it's going to produce that beautiful liquid, I'm going to have to rely on another source. And you see the cornbread is still breaking down. You keep just mashing and chopping. Now, my mother did not like lumpy dressing. She liked for everything to be broken down. I have, through my course of my life, had dressing that was this texture. And that's just not what I'm used to. Not saying it was bad, but that's just not what I'm used to. Now over here, I have some bread that was just freshly chopped. What I'm going to do is add all that. You see I need moisture here, right? So I'm going to take my container of turkey stock, make sure that's mixed up real well, and just add it in. And I'm adding it in, and I'm gonna tell you right now, this is not going to be enough. Don't worry, I have plenty more, because this bread needs to be 1000% completely saturated. You don't have to add the bread cubes in like I did. You can just stick with the cornbread, but we love dressing in this household, so I needed to make sure that it went as far as it can go. So, as you can tell, I do have some liquid. I'm going to let that sit for a bit. I still got my butter that has not completely melted down. I'm going to let this sit. You see my bread still swelling up. My bowl is getting to be too small. So, I mentioned earlier that I have, this is just gizzards and hearts that I chopped. Yeah, it doesn't sound appealing. I chopped them fine because my family says that they do not like them, but it adds a lot of great flavor to the dressing. Okay, so the other thing is my mother was not one to measure. So over the years, I've just learned how to just eyeball things. Now, one thing that I do is I use, never mind my ashy hands, I've been washing them quite a bit. So I do put it here in the very palm. Whoop, that's too much. Okay, of my hand. You want to start off small. This is black pepper. Now, These are dried thyme leaves. Now, poultry seasoning is what is going to give it the color and the flavor that my mother, that I remember from being a little girl, is the flavor is going to come out of this poultry seasoning. Okay. So typically I don't use the shaker. Typically I unscrew it and I add most of the bottle. This was a full bottle. This bottle is now about gone. Okay. But you're going to have to taste. You're going to have to keep tasting to see if it gets, when it gets to that flavor that you know. The butter is almost all the way incorporated. The key to great dressing is the flavor. So the key to great dressing is the flavor. So my cornbread, in my opinion, did not break down all the way that I like it. My mother used to boil chicken pieces, and she would put like pieces of chicken thigh, breast, whatever, in her dressing. There's so many different variations to it. And what I mentioned earlier about, you know, I've had dressing with nuts in it. It's not really my thing. I've had dressing with the golden raisins in it. It has a little bit of sweetness. The raisins actually helped it, and I was surprised. Oyster dressing is incredible. So you're not gonna get a big oyster. The oyster is cooked, chopped, and then added to the dressing like I added the giblets. Okay. I can already tell by looking at this. This is not quite where I need it to be. Now this is ground sage. Sage is a key ingredient in poultry seasoning. So you're not going to add that much of sage. Be very careful with the sage because it'll sneak up on you and the flavor of sage will linger in the back of your throat, and we don't want that. So just be very careful with how much sage you use. I'm gonna start there. Use my tasting spoon. Need more, a lot. I'm gonna use the rest of this poultry seasoning. And it needs more black pepper and salt, seasoning salt. So I'm gonna shake it this time. Brand new bottle doesn't want to come out of there. But you're gonna have to taste it. Okay. One of those bottles is empty, I believe. Starting to get the color. Starting to. You have to incorporate it. Make sure you're incorporating, scraping down the sides of the bowl. Starting to get the color that it needs to have. See, it's soaked in all of that whole container of turkey stock. It soaked all of that in. See, I got a big clump of cornbread there. Excuse me.
Bless you.
It's getting there. I have to go to another bottle of poultry seasoning. You end up using a lot of poultry seasoning. And one year, I bought this off-brand of poultry seasoning, and it had zero flavor. And of course, my family were like, oh, everything tastes good. I knew in my heart that that poultry seasoning did not have its act together, and therefore my dressing did not taste right. I can almost tell you by the color of this that it's still not together without even tasting it. But it's really close to where it needs to be. So because it's close, I start tasting it more often because I don't want to go over. Still needs a bit more salt. Seasoning salt. And a little bit more sage. And again, poultry seasoning. Oh, this is the empty bottle. Again, poultry seasoning. Taste, 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 taste. Cannot stress that enough. Taste your dressing. Taste it. If you feel like it's missing something, if it's not seasoned enough for you, then it's gonna need some more of that Lawry seasoning salt. It feels like the salt level is there, but it needs a partner, a friend, a homie, lover, friend. You put some more black pepper in there. Not much, because you don't want it to be spicy. This is not a spicy dish. It's a very savory dish. Told you this poultry seasoning is the key. And more salt. We got to make sure our dishes are flavorful. You know, not like our vanilla brothers and sisters who sometimes come up short when it comes to the salt factor. Now, looking at this looks about right to me. Maybe a hair lighter than where I'd like it to be, but this looks just about right. So, this looks just about right. So, taste. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that's good. So I love thyme. This is thyme, dried thyme leaves. I love thyme. That's probably about a good teaspoon. And basil. Basil will provide a nice herbal sweetness to it. You don't want too much of basil. Don't want too much of that, okay? Rosemary is also great. You don't need a lot of rosemary. A little bit of rosemary goes a very long way. So like half a teaspoon of rosemary is great. I personally love rosemary, but my son has some medical issues that rosemary will cause his medical issues to flare up. Did not know that because I cooked with rosemary a lot. So nicely seasoned, not salty, not sweet. It tastes good. I mean, I don't know what else to say. So at this point, what I normally do is make sure that I've added everything that I want to add, because I'm about to add my eggs. So I want to add a little bit more cornmeal. Not much. That's about half a cup to, yeah, that's about half a cup of the cornmeal. Okay. Now, I add the cornmeal, and I'm about to add a little bit of flour. I add, my mother added self-rising flour. Now, as you know, self-rising flour has, you know, the additives, the salt, the baking powder. So I have a scoop in my self-rising flour that, can't tell what it reads. Let me see. 1/8 of a cup. So I'm going to add 2 small scoops. So that's probably about 2 to 3 tablespoons of flour, okay? And I spread it out like that because I don't want it to lump. And this is just basically for the texture of the dressing. It's not for anything else but for that, for the texture of the dressing. Because you want your dressing to have a, what's the texture of dressing? Somewhat loose, not like cake where you need to cut it or anything like that, but you want it to be able to be lifted out of its dish with a spoon, okay? So, we got some lumps of flour there. So, I'm gonna add 2 eggs. Mix the eggs in. A lot of people say add your eggs separately. Old school, my mom just crack those eggs and go on with life. It's not that deep. Now I have a lot of dressing. I probably need a 3rd egg, but I'm not big on eggs in my food. I don't eat them, but I do use them in my cooking. So, make sure those eggs are broken up and incorporated completely. You don't want to dip into your dressing and get a big old egg yolk. or the white of an egg. That's pretty nasty. And you will forever be talked about. So make sure that the egg is incorporated completely. Still finding clumps of cornbread there. Okay. Now at this point you can't taste your dressing because now you have raw egg in there. So next thing you do is almost to the last step. You grab your casserole dish. I need it. You grab your casserole dish and you spoon your finished product into a casserole dish. I have a glass, Pyrex, large. I don't know the measurements of this, but this is quite a bit of dressing. It smells incredible, incredibly good. Spoon this into your baking dish. I'm just gonna lift my bowl at this point. Finish it off. Ooh, I ran over the side there. And so my oven, I turned it off by accident, but my oven is set at 350 degrees, or will be set at 350 degrees. So very carefully, I fill this up a bit much, but very carefully slide that into your oven at 350 degrees, and it's going to bake for approximately 1 hour at 350. All right. Thank you for watching.